A homeless girl, broken and starving, stumbles across a crying baby in the trash. She rescues him, unaware that this newborn isn't ordinary, he's the hidden heir of a billionaire empire. Like and subscribe, comment where you are watching from as we dive into this exciting story. The night was cold, the kind of cold that bites through thin clothing and gnaws at the bones. The city streets were alive with neon lights and the hum of traffic, but down in the forgotten alleys where the rich never walked, silence and shadows reigned. Amora, a young homeless girl of barely 19, wrapped her arms tightly around her frail body. Her dress, worn and torn from years of use, clung to her thin frame as she shuffled through piles of garbage. Hunger was her oldest companion. Every night, she searched for scraps in the dumpsters behind restaurants, hoping for half-eaten bread, spoiled rice, or anything that could quiet the growl in her stomach. Her hair was tangled, her face smeared with dirt, but her eyes still held a quiet fire. Life had beaten her down, but not broken her. She was a fighter, even if the world saw her as nothing more than another nameless beggar girl. As she pushed the lid of another dumpster open, the stench of rot hit her nose. She covered her mouth, prepared to dig through the filth. But then, she froze. A sound. Soft. Fragile. A cry. At first, she thought she was imagining it. Hunger sometimes made her dizzy, made her hear things that weren't there. But the sound came again, weak, desperate. Her heart skipped. It wasn't a cat. It wasn't a rat. It was a baby. Trembling, Amora leaned closer. And there, buried beneath newspapers and plastic bags, lay a tiny bundle. A baby, no more than a few days old, wrapped in a torn blanket. His little fists waved in the air, his lips quivering as he cried. Amora's breath caught in her throat. "Jesus," she whispered, her hands shaking. She reached inside, carefully lifting the fragile child out of the filth. The baby's skin was cold, his cry weak. His life was slipping away, discarded like garbage. Tears blurred Amora's vision. She pressed the child against her chest, whispering softly, "Shush, it's okay, it's okay. I've got you now. You're safe." Her own stomach ached from hunger, her body weak from exhaustion, but none of that mattered anymore. In that moment, something inside her shifted. For years, she had fought only for herself, for survival. But now, she held a new purpose in her arms. She looked down at the baby, her voice trembling. "Who could do this to you? Who could throw away something so precious?" The baby's tiny hand curled around her finger, and Amora felt her heart crack open. She didn't know where she would find food for him. She didn't know how she would keep him alive. But she knew one thing. She could not leave him. Her own life had been one of abandonment. Orphaned young, left to fend for herself on the streets, she knew the sting of being unwanted. And she refused to let this child grow up with that same pain. "I don't have much," she whispered, rocking him gently as tears rolled down her cheeks. "But I swear, I'll never let you feel alone. You were thrown away, just like me. But I'll protect you. I'll fight for you." The baby's cry softened as if he understood her promise. His eyes fluttered closed, and his breathing steadied against her chest. Amora looked up at the night sky, her lips trembling as she made a silent vow. "This child will live. Even if I have to starve, even if I have to beg the whole world, he will live." She didn't know that the baby she had just rescued was not an ordinary child. She didn't know that he carried the bloodline of the city's most powerful billionaire. All she knew was that fate had placed him in her arms, and her life would never be the same again. And with that vow, the story began. Morning came slowly, and with it the harsh reality of Amora's new burden. She sat under a crumbling bridge, the baby still wrapped in the torn blanket. The city awoke above her with the rumble of cars and the chatter of footsteps, but down here, life was silent except for the soft breathing of the child in her arms. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. Normally, she could bear the hunger. She had trained herself to ignore it, to sleep through the pain. But now, as the baby whimpered, she realized her hunger didn't matter anymore. What about him? She couldn't feed him. She had no milk. No bottle. Nothing. Desperation surged inside her chest. She stood, cradling the baby tightly, and began to walk the streets. People looked at her with disgust, her dirty clothes, her matted hair, the fragile newborn in her arms. Some muttered insults, others turned away as if she were invisible. Finally, she stopped in front of a bakery. The smell of fresh bread filled the air, making her stomach twist painfully. She looked at the baby, his lips trembling as he cried weakly, then at the shopkeeper inside. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. "Please, sir. I need help," she whispered. "The baby, he needs food. Just a little milk. Please." The man looked up, sneered, and shook his head. "Get out of here, girl. I've got no handouts for beggars." "And where'd you even get that child, huh? Probably stole him too." Amora's eyes burned with tears. She wanted to scream that she hadn't stolen him, that she had saved him. But the word stuck in her throat. She clutched the baby tighter and backed away. By afternoon, she had tried nearly every shop, every stranger she saw. All turned her away. Some cursed at her, others laughed. Nobody cared. Finally, when her legs could no longer carry her, she collapsed near a church. The heavy doors loomed above her, and for a moment she hesitated. She hadn't stepped into a church in years, ever since she lost her parents. Back then, she had prayed for help, for rescue, for someone to love her. But no one came. And she had stopped believing. But now, it wasn't about her. It was about the baby. Pushing the door open, she walked inside. The scent of burning candles filled the air, and the soft glow of stained glass painted the walls. She knelt at the back, cradling the baby and whispering, "God, I don't know if you hear me anymore, but if you do, please. Please don't let this child die. He didn't ask for this. He deserves better. Help me take care of him." At that moment, a nun appeared, her eyes falling on the trembling girl and the crying infant. The nun rushed forward, her voice soft and kind. "My dear child, where did you find him?" Amora broke down, sobbing as she explained. The nun listened silently, then gently took the baby, checking his tiny heartbeat. "He's weak, but he'll survive with care. Come with me." For the first time in years, Amora felt hope. The church gave her a little milk for the baby, some bread for herself, and even a corner to rest. She fed him carefully, watching as his cries softened and his tiny mouth latched to the bottle. Relief flooded her body like a wave. As the baby drifted to sleep, Amora stroked his cheek and whispered, "You're safe now. I'll call you David. Because like the David in the Bible, you'll rise against all odds." The nun smiled faintly at the name, but her eyes lingered on the baby longer than expected. There was something unusual about him. His delicate features, his eyes when they opened, bright, striking grey, the rarest kind. Eyes that mirrored a man she had seen in newspapers many times before. The city's most powerful billionaire, Alexander Kane. Of course, Amora didn't know this. To her, David was just a baby she had rescued. But to the world, his existence was a secret that could shake the city to its core. And though she didn't know it, by saving David, Amora had unknowingly entangled herself with the life of the most powerful man she could never imagine. For now, she only knew one truth: this child was hers to protect. Forever. Years passed. Amora and David lived under the protection of the church. It wasn't a life of luxury, far from it, but it was far better than the cold nights under bridges. Amora worked tirelessly to repay the nun's kindness, scrubbing floors, cooking meals, and helping with chores. David, though frail at first, grew stronger with each passing year. His laughter filled the once quiet halls, and his smile gave Amora purpose. He was her reason to keep going, the one thing that made the pain of her past worth enduring. But there was something about him that always drew attention. His sharp grey eyes. His calm, observant nature. His way of carrying himself, even as a child, like he was meant for something greater. One afternoon, when David was 6, Amora took him to the city market. She clutched his tiny hand tightly, wary of the bustling crowd. She still hated the city. It reminded her of hunger, rejection, and despair. But David needed clothes, and the church didn't always have enough donations. As they passed through the stalls, people began to notice the boy. Not in the way they usually stared at Amora with disdain, but differently. With curiosity. Some even whispered, "Doesn't he look like?" "No, it can't be." But those eyes. Amora tried to ignore them. She was used to whispers. But the way they looked at David unsettled her. At one stall, as she picked out a small shirt, a tall man in a suit stopped, staring. His expression flickered between shock and recognition. Finally, he leaned closer and whispered, "Miss, forgive me, but is this your child?" Amora bristled, pulling David closer. "Yes." "Why?" The man's eyes lingered on David, then he shook his head quickly. "No reason." "My mistake." He hurried off, but Amora's chest tightened. Something about the encounter felt strange. Later that evening, as they walked back to the church, she asked David, "Did you notice how people were looking at you today?" David tilted his head, his grey eyes thoughtful. "Yes. But maybe it's just because we don't belong there. People always stare at us, Mama." She kissed his forehead, forcing a smile. "You're right, my love. They don't understand us. But that's okay." Still, unease gnawed at her. What Amora didn't know was that the man in the market wasn't just anyone. He was a close associate of Alexander Kane, the billionaire who owned half the city, the man whose ruthless decisions determined the fate of thousands. And when he returned to Kane's towering skyscraper that night, he couldn't keep his thoughts quiet. "Sir," he said carefully, standing before Alexander Kane's desk, "I saw a boy today. He looked exactly like you. Same eyes. Same presence. It was uncanny." Alexander, a man of steel composure, looked up sharply. "You know better than to waste my time with nonsense." "I swear it, sir." He must be around 6 years old. With a young woman, clearly poor, perhaps homeless. But the boy? I've never seen such a resemblance. For a moment, silence filled the office. Then Alexander leaned back in his chair, his grey eyes narrowing, the same piercing grey as David's. "Find out everything about them," he ordered coldly. "Now." Back at the church, Amora tucked David into bed. She watched him sleep peacefully, unaware of the storm beginning to brew around them. She whispered softly, "No matter what happens, David, I'll never let anyone take you away from me." But fate was already moving. The secret of David's bloodline was no longer hidden. And soon, the worlds of a poor homeless girl and the city's most powerful billionaire would collide. Like and subscribe for part 2, because what happens next will shock you, and comment part 2 in the comments.